And we're back.
And we are
Uh,
back.
YouTube only this time. Uh, so today we are back in back in Scorched Desert. Hooray!
Yeah.
Uh, this is one of the missions that was added post-release. One of the mission chains that was added post-release. So it takes you to this zone, and we also briefly enter one of the dungeons to do more character interaction with one of the
Welcome, welcome. Sorry
I
about
don't know
this.
what you would call it,
My name
dungeon bosses, dungeon masters.
Mm-hmm.
This mission is kind of a pain because, well, it wants you to decipher some riddles to find certain areas to go there and then do stuff.
Um, and the funny thing is, apparently, this mission also contains a lot of like Egyptology, like I don't like. I think you said that they pass through one of
No
it
rush.
involves like the
Visitors are
Cambridge
always
camp.
welcome.
Yes, you have to find the other Oxford dig site. And so here I literally just look it up because I'm like, I remember this mission being a bastard, so I'm not gonna derp around. So I
So
just
yeah,
look it
whatever.
up.
But yeah, so like, and I don't have material enough to talk about like Egyptology. And like even though that's a really interesting field, and not like just the study of Egypt, but the study of Egypt and all the stupid shit people got up to back in like the 20s and well before that too. But I
One
can't.
of the most popular uh, inks at the time was
Yeah,
Mummy
Mummy Brown.
Brown, and they would just literally shred these ancient artifacts to make a type of ink.
And it was a type of paint. It was very popular in in like the super expensive paintings in the 1700s. The sort of thing rich people spent lots of money on. And but I am, however, in something of a better position to talk about contemporary imperialism. I can talk about the. I literally realized this as we opened up this video. Um, I can talk about like imperialism in general, about British relationship with Egypt because it was not the standard relationship Britain had with its colonies. I can talk a little bit about the Mahdi, and probably make someone watching this mad eventually, but we'll see. But yeah, there's a lot going on here that I can just ramble about because that's kind of what I do every stream. Um, so yeah, let me think where to start. I don't know where you want me to start. Where you would want me to start
Okay,
cracking.
well, start with how the British gained dominion over Egypt.
Um, it took a while. So I like. The funny thing is, I don't remember the exact situation of the Codominion and of like uh, rise of British influence. That specific era is kind of a weak point. I do know, however, what came before and after it. Because the thing is,
Before
okay,
was the Ottomans, correct?
sort of. What happened is, like, when the Ottomans were after the Ottomans took down the Byzantine Empire and made the Aegean the center of power and Anatolia the center of power, they took on two neighboring powers. They took on to their east. Well, actually, they took on three neighboring powers. They took on the Holy Roman Empire to the north and west, which they did really well against at first and just burned out. They tried to take down the Persians and did way worse at. And they tried to take down the Egyptians to their south. And Egypt at this point was ruled by a dynasty they're called Mamluks. And they were descended from slave soldiers from Central Asia who they used to be the guardians of like the bodyguards of the previous dynasty, and then they just overthrew them and took over. But they were okay, I guess. Some of them were good, some of them were bad, but they weren't a brilliant dynasty. And the Ottomans were able to smash them and take, like, up until that time, the Levant was like, which is everything from Syria down to the modern Egyptian border was traditionally a Egyptian sphere of influence. If a place controlled it that wasn't, like, actually in the Levant, was probably Egypt. And that the Ottomans broke Egypt and took it away, and from then on, Egypt's sphere of influence, or like Egypt's control, usually ended at the Sinai Peninsula. That said, I mean, they took it over at first and ruled it as best they could for a while. But after a while, they ended up putting a couple of, they put a guy in charge, I think in like the 1600s, who basically declared independence without actually declaring independence. He stopped answering to the government, even though he never actually claimed to be like anything other than an Ottoman governor, and founded his own little dynasty. And after a while, Egypt, like, as the Ottoman Empire, always had this weird relationship with its outlying provinces, where some of them were like pirate states that were friendly rather than actual vassals. Some of them were actual vassals. Some of them were centrally controlled. Egypt eventually sort of slipped the noose. Like, it sort of slipped the sphere of control to be its own thing for a while. And then the Europeans came. I know Napoleon swept through Egypt at one point and did a lot of effort. He put a lot of effort into making himself look as friendly to Islam as possible. It didn't work very well, but he thought that Egypt was important enough to, like, as a place to, for like political reasons, not like historical or scientific or whatever, a place to build a power base. But he got driven out, and eventually it came under British influence, but not British control. The British were never able to take it over like a proper colony, like they did a lot of other places. Egypt at the time was still too big and too powerful. It had too much control over too much area, and the Nile was still as productive as ever. It did not hurt that Egypt was a really big producer of cotton, and this is during the early 1800s, as the Industrial Revolution kicked off, that there were a lot of factories in England that needed a lot of cotton. So they originally they traded a lot with the US, especially the South. Then the Civil War happened and that cut off. And after some political wrangling, they just switched to Egypt, and also India to some extent. And that kind of cratered the economy of the South in the long run. But that's another story. Anyway, so Britain had a lot of interest in controlling Egypt for a bunch of reasons. Partly because there was a lot of, as the 1800s went on, Egyptology became all the rage. The actual beginnings of scientific archaeology started taking root, and it became a national thing. Like a thing of, how do I put this? Like
prestige.
Yeah, national prestige. Yeah, if you played...
Like in Victoria 2.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah, that's one of the...
In Victoria 2, one of the things that get your nation prestige is archaeological discoveries and exploring Africa.
Mm-hmm. And you get a lot of stuff from cracking up in the Valley of Kings and stuff. It's like Victoria 2 is based on something. Like, it gamifies it like crazy, but you know. But it was it was a good, important place to pay attention to, and the British and the French also wanted it bad, and like nobody else was in a position to really do anything because the Ottomans were in decline, Russia was trapped up in the Black Sea, Italy had yet to pull itself together, and Austria had yet to do anything related to the sea and never would. But like, Egypt was also kind of too big and too sophisticated for Britain to just take over. So they ended up putting a lot of pressure on it and making it into a protectorate, where depending on who you're talking about and what it basically, I'm kind of abbreviating here to the point of inaccuracy, but they are like, imagine if the ambassador to a country had about as much influence as the country's prime minister within but not necessarily anymore in the running of its internal functioning. And that's kind of what that situation was like. Egypt had more independence than most colonies by far, but it was not truly independent. It did, however, but have enough strength to push back. Like, you may have heard once in a while there's a story of, like, you see some white guy went into, you'll see a story in the news, a white guy founded a kingdom for his daughter in Africa, and people are talking about neocolonialism and all that jazz. If you look into that, if you look into where exactly this is, you will always find that's a place called Bir Tawi. A little triangle of completely unoccupied territory near the border of Sudan and Egypt. The reason it exists is because of the British. Basically, there was a huge swath of territory in the south of Egypt that was contested between the two. Britain had a thing in the mid-1800s and later where they were obsessed with the idea of building a railroad straight from Cape Town in South Africa all the way up to Cairo, as a way of
Cape to Cairo Railway.
Yep, as a way of basically massively shortening goods transport and allowing very easy access to the interior.
What was his name?
Rhodes. Cecil.
Yes, that's who I'm thinking. Cecil Rhodes.
Yeah, and then he was. God, Cecil Rhodes was a British imperialist.
Oh, but this is important. This is important.
What we were calling the ages.
We are now getting info on what the ages are. The ages, as we have previously stated, are time that then rewinds.
Mhm.
It snaps back like a rubber band.
This has all happened before and will happen again with divergences caused by artifacts that are out of place that remain through the cycle.
So it's not.
But now we're just getting confirmation of that.
Right. Yeah, and I have never played this part, so this is news to me. It makes.
You will actually want to pay attention to this part because they got the guy who plays Dr. Klein to do a bunch of really hammy acting.
Mhm.
And he is hilarious because he's very much generic Nazi scientist.
Oh, good.
And he has a point here. What is the end of the age, and why does it always reset? We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
We know what ended the age, but what is the age going to that causes it to reset?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there is something fundamentally wrong with the whole picture, and there's something like that keeps breaking over and over again. So, and that does make sense. It's like and you have hell, which is a fragment or an offgrowth of the second age, which existed past the rewind to the third age, so it's still around. Which would also explain why it was cut off from mana from the world, because that rewind probably severed whatever connections it had. So yeah, sucks to be a demon.
And here's his first mistake: microdosing the filth.
Jesus Christ, that's not how that works.
Adjust to the changes without suffering.
You ever meet someone who's like really smart but also really stupid?
Yes, like
that is absolutely Dr. Klein.
Yeah, God, I mean, I work in tech. Those people are everywhere. You know?
Oh God.
God,
tech people.
Like, I mean, I'm very lucky in the part of tech I work where that particular mindset is very strongly de-emphasized and criticized. But you get a lot of tech people who are, I can reformat your hard drive by looking at it, and I comprehend about enough about how any other culture functions that I can insult them properly in my language, and that's about it. Like, you find some people who just don't know jack but think they know everything. It's like everything. If you've ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Oh yes. You find all sorts of those people in tech.
Yeah, that.
And here I'm going to die a bunch during this because I'm not exactly remembering how to do this. what you have to do is you have to put the little thingamajig you got as part of the mission down so it absorbs the whatever the hell this is.
Whatchamacallit.
And then I die. Yeah, and then I die a bunch during the Dr. Klein part.
This game is really bad at explaining specifically that.
It does not telegraph well.
Yeah, this is, I think, the third time we've run into a situation where it expects you to use an item and doesn't tell you to do so.
And see, like, I used it, but it hadn't acted, so it has a cooldown that I didn't know about.
Mm-hmm. God. I cannot express how much I hate it when that happens in a game, where you're, like, where you're doing something and, there's an aspect that wasn't explained to you that screws you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well. But yeah, like, God.
There we go.
You did it!
And there's the next little Klein recording.
Quick access inventory updated.
Thus far, my intellect has
And
not
it's the funniest
suffered
one.
under a regimen of the filth. I find I am still able to turn my
God
head
damn it.
fast enough to catch my shadow before it sneaks up on me. I confound it every time. If I were mad, would I be able to do this? I think not. I feel safe in increasing the dosage.
Wow, that is some Telltale Heart level. If there's no way I'm crazy. No crazy person could ever display absolutely horrifying levels of focus and obsession, right?
Quick access inventory updated.
I
Okay,
have
and this
seen
is,
the dark
some
universe
Lovecraft shit.
yawning, where the black planets roll without aim, where they roll in their horror unheeded, without knowledge or luster or name. I have seen things in my sleep. Nothing is as ancient as sleep except for the sleepers. I have seen the spaces beyond. Shh, 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 shh. I have seen things I dare not share with Rochi. They who sleep must wake. This is not the first time.
And
this
then
has
another
happened.
reference to the ages.
When everything is gone, it won't be the last. The vermiculated inevitability is horrific and beautiful.
Vermiculated, that's a word I haven't seen in a very long time. God, I don't even remember what that means. I think that means like riddled with holes. This is going to torture me until I Google it.
And there is something he says in these that is weird. He says that the people who are Gaia touched are also being changed, but on a geological scale. Which is slightly creepy.
Yep. Like, what does that even mean? Like,
I am the doctor. You look surprised to see me. Curious. Do I know you?
And here's a reference to the fact that apparently in canon,
If you
dungeon
killed
bosses
me,
do not actually die.
Verdammt. The revivification process
Or at least
plays
Dr. Klein
havoc
does.
with my memory. You are here
yeah.
regarding the tremors, yes?
He's kind of,
Strange phenomenon. The vibrations travel from our 3 dimensions into the spaces beyond.
it's not 3 dimensions.
Perhaps
What kind of...
you know things about
that's
the
not-
tremors that I do not. We play a question game, yes? Very simple. I apply.
It's very
pain.
Lovecraft, isn't it?
You
Yeah.
debate the pain with answers. Shall we begin?
Yeah.
Then I get hit with the pin, then I get...
The tremors made the filth quiver.
And
Yeah.
we trying to activate it again.
Yeah. Fucking mechanics.
Tell me what I want to know.
Well, at least it looks impressive.
It does.
I've been watching videos. I saw a video recently of somebody who modded Skyrim VR to the point where they could physically grab other people and like not like corpses, but like grab them, and like pull their heads back so they can stab them in the throat. Yeah, so there's some people can do some crazy shit these days.
I'm actually listening to the audiobook version of Masters of Doom, which is about the id Software company, the id Corporation, and everything they did.
Oh.
I'm only up to Wolfenstein 3D, but already I can tell you, John Carmack is autistic. I say this as an autistic person. John Carmack has hella autism.
Yeah, and John Romero has. I don't know if he's neurodivergent, but he is a douchebag.
Oh, he absolutely comes off as a douchebag. But admittedly, this is pre-Daikatana, and
Yeah,
he does say Daikatana was like his come to Jesus moment.
Yeah.
Like the moment when he realized he'd been a huge asshole.
Yeah, like so that kind of ego can. You get George Lucas with the right kind of people to rein you in. You can produce miracles, but you need to be able to let people rein you in. Otherwise, you get Daikatana or the
and
like.
To be fair to Daikatana, the issue is not what he thought of. The issue was the implementation.
Yeah.
Please understand.
Like, you give that a couple more years in the oven, maybe we have something. But, you know, as it stands, software is a business. You gotta get that shit out the door.
And you can't run it like a concert tour. It's like, and I mean, like, I'm finding myself in the position of condemning and defending the prequel trilogy at the same time, because I like the prequels. They're not good, like we've talked about this fun. They're not good movies, but they're fun movies, especially if you go into them with the right mindset. They're not, like, actually awful.
The thing I always felt bad for about the prequels is I get exactly what Lucas is trying to do. He is trying to tell a political thriller. He's trying to tell the downfall of a society and its corruption into the Empire. But he's not good enough to do it.
Yeah, he's just not good enough a writer. Not good enough at plotting, character development. Because, like, writing has multiple skills involved. You can have something like, say, Final Fantasy X, which, I mean, it's famous in the West for how bad the translation is. I've looked it up. Apparently, the original, like, dialogue is just as terrible in the Japanese. It's not any better. The thing is, while the dialogue's pretty bad, the plotting is some of the best I've ever seen in a video game. It's absolutely brilliant. Like, the way that they design, they parcel out all of these reveals. They parcel out everything that happens. Like, they drop stuff early and hint at it very subtly and very intelligently at times. And there's, like, but the deeper, at a high level, it's brilliant. And the deeper you go, the sloppier the execution gets. That's what happens when you have a writer who is really good at, like, or a writing team, I guess, who's really good at one part of the process and bad at another part of the process.
Now, if you want a video game that is excellent at writing, you play Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri, which was written by a philosophy major.
Yeah, or you play something like Disco Elysium, or Planescape
I haven't
Torment.
even started on Disco Elysium because there is so much to it that I'm like,
It's a little intimidating.
I'm never gonna. It's intimidating, yeah.
The quakes grow stronger.
I saw one.
By my calculations, they originate from somewhere near the Forbidden City.
I saw one excerpt from it, and it was just a picture of some of the dialogue fails.
Yeah.
My favorite one was you have to think up the question about communism, and you fail. So you say, "Are women bourgeoisie?" And I thought that was the funniest shit.
God damn it.
Because that was absolutely a line of thought within fascism, was that women were the downfall of men.
Yeah.
I believe there was a French fascist philosopher, I say philosopher loosely, French fascist
Quick
thinker
access inventory
who
updated.
thought that, which is just
Parasitic worm swirls the eyes of the slave.
hilarious to me.
Snail
Yeah,
is compelled
it's,
to climb higher
You can find like
Begay
biological.
fascism.
Yeah, God damn. But yeah, biological essentialism is a
Ascension
hell of a
comes
drug.
with pain.
It can make you think some very
The
weird
belly of
things.
ravenous wings.
Like,
I feel
but like, you know,
the
so
You know, we're recording this and we haven't mentioned the largest geopolitical event of the age. The Queen died.
yeah. Oh, man, way to date us. But like, yeah, it's.
I hate that fucking ball. I hate that fucking little patrolling ball because I never figure out how to dodge it reliably.
I thought you were talking about something related to the Queen for a second. I was like, what? What patrolling? Is it like?
No, I mean I'm not a fan of monarchies, but
like,
the whole pomp and circumstance over the Queen is quite frankly, to me, I don't want to say disgusting. It's more archaic and weird, and I don't like it.
yeah, it's.
But that's a personal political thing for me. Like I
Uh-huh.
don't care if you like the Queen.
Yeah, it's like the way that they're trying to shut down the country, including stuff that saves people's lives, is
Yeah, they shut the food banks down for mourning, and it's like, you know, that's 10 days of people not getting food, right?
that's such a Tory thing. That's yeah, God, but God, I don't know. We shouldn't be I don't think we like.
You felt it.
Oh well, maybe we'll see the fall of the monarchy in our lifetimes. That'll be
Anguish of the
interesting.
trembling earth.
Probably, almost certainly, won't be
It
violent.
disturbs my
Um,
children and plucks
But
discord
who
on the
knows?
song
I
of
don't.
the
I hope it
stars.
isn't. That's because you can't ultimately you can't help being born into the monarchy, and that means there's going to be a lot of people whose crime is
Speak with my
being
daughter,
born rich,
with
suffering.
Oya.
But
She will tell you more.
How are they going to suffer? They'll suffer less.
I
Do
mean,
you
well,
have any idea how much tabloid there is in being the monarchy?
I'm a historian. Remember, I've studied enough revolutions to know what happens to rich and powerful people during revolutions. Like,
Well, we're not talking about a revolution. We're talking about the parliament passing a law saying we no longer need the monarchy. And
there's.
then they just go back to being regular rich people.
I mean, well, it depends on how much of the stuff they confiscate is state territory. And like, it depends on what exactly that looks like, and that can lead to like stuff getting taken away. And I know
Oh no,
it's not
I'm,
like
I'm
yeah,
only
I know,
a
I
mere
know.
millionaire instead of a billionaire. How horrid!
I know, I know.
Came out of
But
exile.
remember, this is the
Now
Tory
the
party. It's hard to
defenses
know
are
what they'll
breached.
do if anything
Finally,
traditional is
there was
threatened.
you and your kind.
So
I have
I
learned to
don't
both
know.
fear
This
and
is
welcome
like,
the agents of Gaia.
you know what? I think we are currently discussing
But the
politics, and we're not
latest
supposed to be doing that in this
visitors are
LP.
what worries me.
We're
The
not.
Demons from the
So,
hell dimensions have
um,
heard the whispers of the Black
Let's,
Pharaoh,
let's
and
go
they
back
are
to
transcending the
after
dimensions to come
Egypt
to his
conquers-
aid.
After
We have
the
enough
Ottomans
trouble with
conquer
the horrors
Egypt,
brought back from the land of
the
the
British
dead.
come in,
We don't need
lured by the
visitors
cotton,
from other worlds as well.
take over,
Sort of.
and then you
Gear to
said
wheel.
it was essentially it was
I mean, okay. In fairness, there was like a 200 period where the British weren't around, where Egypt was effectively its own like local power. Just to be clear on that, it wasn't somebody stepping in, but the British eventually did step in. The thing is,
you said it was the equivalent of the ambassador being as powerful as the prime minister.
yeah, but not necessarily more powerful than the prime minister. Like, and the two had dueling. The two they had some measure of control over internal policies, and they were able to thumb their nose. Like, you know how in the U.S. there are a lot of states that will just ignore the central government sometimes, do what the fuck they want. But ultimately, the government controls the purse strings. So even though they can and do get away with shit and stay getting away with shit, they ultimately still have to answer to the top and still suffer the consequences of their actions.
Yeah.
It was kind of like that. Whereas in other colonies, other proper colonies, they wouldn't get away with it ever. But like, until very late. But like, so I mentioned the beer to wheel triangle. All the way down there in basically, it's now Sudan and South Sudan. It used to be sort of a bunch of areas that were loosely under Egyptian control. And eventually, the British and Egyptian governments came to an agreement where they would co-administer that territory. And while the British control over Egypt was not completely formalized, was allowed to influence, it was formalized in Sudan. But the Egyptians still had a lot of control over it. And there was a lot of wrangling over the former southern border of Egypt and what territory went to where. So, this is like, I think 1890s? There were a bunch of formal debates over, like, not debates, but like diplomatic wrangling to the point of Egyptian troops marching over the border to occupy territories over where exactly the border between they called it the Codominion of Sudan. The Anglo-Egyptian Codominion, or Dominion, something like that, of Sudan, and Egypt itself. And there were two lines. One is a straight line across, like, like a parallel, like a latitude line. That's the one that you see in most maps. And that's the one that Egypt claims today. But there was an older one that was a lot more jagged, and there's a point where it dips south, like right in the middle of the border, and then it goes up north, and east of that, like rough, jagged triangle carves out between the center part of the border and the coast. Rich area. There's a few useful cities there, and there's a shit ton of oil off in the ocean. And both sides wanted that oil desperately. And ever since Sudan became independent, it has wanted that oil desperately. And Egypt and Sudan have come to the border of fighting wars in that region. Meanwhile, the beer to wheel triangle, like the dip that was left over, nobody cares about it. Nobody lives there. There's no reason to live there. Like, it's just sand and rock. It used to have, like, a few nomadic tribes that passed through there a few times a year, but those tribes have moved on because global warming has hit it pretty hard and gotten rid of what little habitability it had. So it is, like, both Egypt and Sudan don't claim it. Sudan claims that it actually holds that territory that is currently under Egyptian control, and based on that claim, beer to wheel is Egyptian. And Egypt also doesn't care about it because it doesn't want it. So it is the last unclaimed piece of land on Earth outside
Terra
of
Nullius.
Terra Nullius, yes. Outside of, like, a part of the Croatian-Serbian border, I think. There are a couple of other areas out in, like, there's one, I know somewhere along one of Croatia's borders. I think there's another spots in the Balkans where those lines are where the territorial line, like international borders, don't line up in ways that people like. So just like with beer to wheel, they're inhabiting certain areas. People are basically abandoning the less valuable areas to either occupy or hope they occupy the more valuable areas. But beer to wheel is by far the largest. So you get the occasional person who will go to beer to wheel and go, okay, I am now the king of my daughter's Namia, and start announcing things and passing laws, and people will harass them on Twitter for being racist, and it's a whole thing. The thing is, Terra Nullius has not existed as a legal principle since technically ever. Like, it was, you can't really claim land as a sovereign state unless you're a sovereign citizen, which means you're delusional in the first place, so you can do whatever you want. But, like, it doesn't mean anything. They can't actually do anything, and the land is not, like, it isn't completely worthless. I guess if you really wanted to, you could build stuff there or something, but it's not like, it has so little value that nobody would care even if you did, you know? So there's...
by the by, we are in hell. This this is what hell looks like.
Yeah. Oh, hey, and nice armor. And appropriate faces and lots of broken masonry. So yeah, and remember I think we in real time talked about this over a year ago, but like hell was cut off from basically the life force of reality. So it has been gradually decaying ever since for 1.5 at least ages, and that's a lot of time. Let's see, yeah, the story, like, have we talked about the Rakshasas and their history?
Yes, we did. Way back into it.
Yeah. It's tragic, it sucks. Yeah, this is what happens when you make a pocket dimension and fail to account for what happens if the power source gets interrupted.
Well, clearly they needed better UPS.
Yeah, that too. I mean, look, right now, something at UPS headquarters is fucked up, and they aren't delivering packages that they send, which makes, and I don't know what it is about my unit that makes it so hard for people to deliver this shit here, but it's gotten to the point where I'm just having people ship parcels to a friend of mine, and I go pick it up, and that's nothing compared to hell, you know?
I mean, really, what that age needed was a good disaster management technician. They really needed a better disaster plan.
I don't know. I mean, there comes a point where you can only plan ahead so far. I think they may have run out.
If the U.S. government can plan for its own destruction in nuclear war, these guys can plan for whatever the fuck happens. These secret societies can plan for whatever the fuck the end of the age is.
I get. Well, yeah, they probably can, but like, I think the Illuminati.
I mean, it's not necessarily gonna work, but they could plan for it.
I mean, like, the Illuminati wouldn't, because I don't think they're capable. You know, I mean, well, they follow the standard corporate 6 months to 5 years planning cycle, so I don't think they'd go any further than that. And I think the Dragon only arguably planned for anything. And meanwhile, the Templars are, I don't know. Do you think the Templars have enough humility to make that kind of plan?
I think the modern Templars do.
Maybe.
Like is said in the very beginning, they've gone through like a big reform. Like, they're attempting to not be a organization based on nobility and peerage and stuff. So it's they're very much trying to be a merit-based organization, and we see some of that later in some of the cutscenes with our handler.
Yeah, and you know, he's still, you know, I mean, well, okay, we're talking about an organization in Britain where an extremely important dude is black, and like one of the major factions here, and that's not something that would have flown 100 years ago in Britain. So
that's not something that would have flown 50 years ago in Britain.
Well, probably it depended. It would not have flown on a national level. I don't know. When you're talking about like magic and shit, it's hard to know how.
Yeah, it's hard. It's like Harry Potter. Is there racism against black people in Harry Potter?
Yeah.
We don't see any, but is that the nature of the wizarding world, or is that the nature of, hey, it's a British boarding school children's story?
Or is it J.K. Rowling, and expecting too much of her as far as that is kind of a fool's errand?
Well, considering what she said about what happened to indigenous wizards, I'm not sure.
Yeah, she's a mess.
Let's not talk about Harry Potter because it's depressing.
Yeah,
Harry Potter is now a depressing topic.
Yeah,
Sister.
it is.
Sister.
Sucks.
What was that noise?
I don't know, little brother.
How do you, a Jew, feel about
sounds
the
like thunder and
new
flashes like lightning,
storyline
but it's
Oh, I
not.
heard
of
about
Hogwarts
that.
Legacy?
Oh, come on.
The blood libel?
Stop.
Oh, yeah,
I'm scared.
Hush, little
God.
brother.
And
Don't
my
be.
favorite thing
I'm
was
right
when
here.
she blamed, talked about trans people
Is it
misleading
over?
autistic
For
people into
now.
being trans.
But the
That
enemy
is what
digging
got,
in
like,
the ruins and they are
her.
opening the
I've known
ground with
about
fire and
her
noise. They must
anti-Semitism
be
since
stopped.
somebody
We'll make it sound
talked
so
to me
easy,
about
big sister.
what exactly
But
the
how can we
goblins in
stop
Harry
what we don't
Potter are,
understand?
and I was like,
We will
oh,
think of something.
oh, that makes
Pieces
sense.
of the city
I am
are
But,
very
like-
surprised
away
that
from the
you,
valley,
as
and the
sensitive
black
as you
oil
are
is
to Jewish
seeping
issues,
out of
did
the
not
ground.
pick up
I
on
don't like
small,
black oil.
short,
It gives me nightmares.
big-nosed, greedy race of
Maybe you'll give
bankers
the bad people
Yeah,
nightmares
with
too.
like-
unique
What is
flaws,
that?
like fucking
just leave
immediately.
them
Like
be,
I
let them
picked that up,
destroy
and I was
themselves.
like 10.
Just let them go.
I wasn't
I was
looking.
like, damn!
I was
Every
even younger.
part
I
of the
wasn't, and I was not looking
Every
for it,
part
and
of
I
the
did
city
not
they
think
remove,
about Harry Potter
every
much
drop
after a
of black
certain
oil that
age.
seeps out
Like
hurts us.
and not out of
Hurts
disdain
me.
until
I
relatively
can feel our
recently,
grip on the Black
but I just
Pharaoh's
grew out
slipping.
of it. I just
So
like
what's your
fell out
plan?
of that
You
fandom and
always
never
have a
went back.
plan.
But like,
Oh,
I don't know.
I've been active in fanfiction communities as a reader,
Oh, no.
and believe me,
Starting
people
again.
figured it out.
Close
oh,
your
people
eyes,
have known for a
brother.
while, but like,
Close your
People
eyes
are
and
always
listen
trying to
them.
rehabilitate the goblin stuff she wrote, like giving them an actual culture and theories and stuff.
and at this point, just don't. Maybe
And
just
it's
don't.
very much. I don't know, what would you call it? Revisionist fiction?
Yeah, it is revisionist. It very much is. Like, I know that that's like a whole thing in fan fiction where people will try and take shit that's awful and rebuild it, but it's the Harry Potter situation.
It's not.
right now
It's
is
not as
such a
bad as
garbage
what.
fire.
It's not as bad as how people treat the House Elf situation.
Yeah. Oh god, that's that one I picked up on. That one I was like, this is kind of weird. And it's kind of weird
Because
that
there
Hermione's freaking
is.
silly.
I have seen many ways people treat the House Elf situation, and in general, the way they treat it is either A, ignore it, or B, make it so House Elves have to be bonded magically to you in order to survive, which presents an entirely different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
Because
Special
it's
assignment
still
procedure.
bad.
Initializing.
I have very rarely seen anyone go, yes, the wizards are very wrong about this.
Yeah. That is like, I don't know. Harry
Oh,
Potter
I
fans
hate
are-
those guys. Those suicide bomber guys, I hate
Oh, of
them.
course. But, and like, I mean, we're talking putting suicide bombers in a Muslim country is kind of a eyebrow-raising moment when it comes to games. But let's not talk about.
I didn't even see that. I was more talking about how gameplay-wise it's not great, because if you've already dodged, you cannot move fast enough to get out of the radius.
But like, I remember. I mean, the suicide attack enemies are awful, just as a general rule.
They always are. There has never been a moment when a suicide attack enemy is...
Unless you're talking like Pokemon, and it is part of a strategy that you can use. But like, that's Pokemon. Like, I remember, God, when I was playing Fallout 4, those football super mutants with the mini
Oh
nukes.
god, I hate them so much.
God, and it's not fun. It's like, it screws, it ups the tension in an unpleasant way really suddenly, then just drops it back down. And that's not a good way to keep the action moving.
Especially with how much of a bullet sponge late level enemies are.
Yeah. Yeah, Fallout 4 enemies can turn into bullet sponges.
To be fair, so does the player.
But then that's the player, and you know, you kill a lot of people in those games, but there's only one of you.
That is fair. I mean, I don't know if I'd count super mutants as people.
You know, I don't know. That's fair, but there's a lot of enemies at the very least.
That is true.
I mean, well, they can talk, they can make things, they can like communicate. That's what a lot of people count. That's what a lot of people like make as put as the dividing line.
I don't like thinking about super mutants because they are essentially a race of brain damaged hulks.
Yeah, they're
Like they're a very sad story and a very fucked up one.
yeah.
Like a lot of things in Fallout, if you actually read the backstory.
Yeah. Like, okay, Fallout backstory is always tragic. It always ends sad. Like, it's not that
Just knowing anything about the pre-war United States tells you this is not a healthy society.
yeah. And it's like,
is explicitly fascist.
yeah, and like it really is, isn't it? Like in ways that a lot of people don't think about. But it's
Well, they don't think about it because they see it as a parody instead of, yeah, no, that's what fascism looks like.
yeah, they see it as a parody of capitalism instead of a depiction of fascism. And you know, I won't go into politics, but as we see, if you can take capitalism far enough, then it will become fascism. But like, it's God, pre-war America and Fallout is such a fucking awful place. And they do, like, the frustrating thing is, like you see a lot of you know, the discourse on the internet about the old Fallouts and the new Fallouts and how the new Fallouts are happy fun times. And like, I remember crawling out of the vault in 4, and finding a computer, and the first piece of fluff text you find out in the open is a drug dealer who's selling huge amounts of drugs to everyone in the neighborhood. Like, and walking through houses and finding skeletons hugging each other as the bombs drop. And it's like, yeah, I get it. I get where you're going. The like older games did that better, I understand, but you don't have to be essentialist like that.
Part of the problem is just the way Bethesda designs. Like, they don't have a holistic design philosophy. They have, like, people go, oh, this would be a neat quest, put the quest in. They don't look at it from a holistic perspective and go, what quest should be in this? They say, oh, that looks neat, put it in the game.
Yeah, they build toy boxes as much as games. And it's like, God, there are times when Fallout 4 feels like Minecraft, and you just go around collecting goods to build your giant, like, pixel art dick in the middle of the forest or something. Except in this case, it's like you're building the pixel art out of scrap. I don't know. It's funny. I love watching. I kind of like it when there are people who talk about who wanted this settlement thing, and I've seen that multiple times. Great deals of enthusiasm. And I remember one of the most popular Fallout 3 mods back when I was playing Fallout 3 was called the Settlers mod, and it allowed you to create a settlement. It had hundreds of thousands of downloads. At least
that is
on
generally
one side.
how Bethesda.
Yep.
That is generally how Bethesda does research for what should be in their
Yeah,
next game.
pretty much.
Is what is the most impressive and downloaded mod that is not sexual.
Yeah. God. And
You have to put the qualifier on.
you have to put that qualifier on it. You know, have you ever actually been to the slab?
Yes.
It's the Lover's Lab is so weird. It's terrifying. It's terrifying.
The shit they put effort into to like animate and props. It's amazing what Horny can achieve.
Yeah, it's the level of technical expertise on display in some of these mods. Like, I saw one that was just like, it was a brothel mod that basically rehauled the entire game with that in mind. And it's like, how many hours of skeletal animation did you sink into skeletal animation for each kind of like? It's astonishing.
I saw one that gave every enemy a sexual attack that could get you pregnant.
Of course.
And when I say every enemy, I mean every enemy.
Of course. But like, that absolutely sounds like a slap. But like, God, the level of it's one of those things where these people have been so submerged in their fetishes for so long that it can be disturbing, but it's grown so cartoonish. It's not as offensive as it would have been if it was less cartoonish. If that makes sense.
And the weirdest part is, you know that these are the well-adjusted ones too.
I mean, relatively speaking, they're probably, but like, yeah.
These are the people you would never expect to have that fetish. Like these are basically your coworker. You're like, another bomber. These are basically your coworker at work. You do not expect anything of that man like this. But
like, this guy
he's a programmer on Slab.
Yeah, this guy has a wife, 3 kids, a happy life. He's coming up on retirement. and he's written 5 mods about making prehensile feet specifically to master his character. And it's like, I mean, and the weird thing is, if you've ever actually met these people, like, a lot of them are fucked up, and a lot of them are like the sanest, stablest people you have ever met. They've reached horny enlightenment. They've found a way to express all of their darkest impulses without hurting anybody, and they are just living their best lives. It's
horny enlightenment. I'm gonna steal that phrase.
It is very. It is I remember way back in the day. If you remember D's reputation on 4chan.
Yes.
How it was like it. And for those of you who are lucky enough not to know, 4chan is a horrible place. D is where all the most horrible fetishes go. And I remember
D's tagline is hentai alternative.
Yes, there you go. And
that's all you really need to know.
And they had a reputation back in the day for being the board people went to for relationship advice, because you would just drop into a random fetish thread where people were talking about. I just reuse an idea: prehensile feet jacking dicks off, and ask, I'm worried about what my girlfriend thinks of this, and somebody in the thread would, at least according to the stereotype, reply, okay, yeah, you just do this. The most important thing is communication. Be aware that it takes some effort to make the relationship work on both parts, and there are always more fish in the sea if this doesn't work out, but it's worth seeing if you can go for it, and if you think it'll be received positively. And then the next picture is something completely depraved. And, like...
I remember one of the funniest things I ever saw out of D was the Cave Johnson thread, where someone would post a fetish picture, and then someone would post a Cave Johnson rant about it. Like, Cave Johnson here, we've invented a gas that turns you into a slime girl, and we need you all to test it.
I remember hearing, listeners, if you've ever seen the meme where hand-holding is treated as something incredibly lewd and disgusting, or more specifically, if you've ever heard someone say, like, consensual sex in the missionary position for the purpose of procreation, and seeing people react with horror, that is a D meme that escaped containment and has gotten to the wider internet. And that was my first contact with D. Somebody, he's seeing that, laughing at it, and someone in a thread, like, not even somewhere else commenting, you know where this comes from, right? And it was like, okay, I see.
But we finally did that side mission we got ages ago, kill Acolyte Ashik. He was here, we met him here. But basically what these folks are doing is digging for more filth.
Great, such a good idea.
Yeah, I know, right? I can't wait till we get to see what the filth is doing in Romania.
God, and Romania's full of a lot of, like, in like Egypt, there's like 2 things going on. There's Orochi and the Black Pharaoh, and that's it. And like that Orochi is directly connected to the Black Pharaoh. Meanwhile, in Romania, you have forest spirits and Soviet like remnants and AIs and fucking all kinds of crazy garbage running around. Fucking everybody's fucking with everybody else, and it's just.
I can't wait to show you guys the occult space program dungeon.
Yeah.
Which explored not just outer space, but inner space.
Yes. Yeah. God. Not like the God. Someday, when we get there, when we get to that section of Romania, I'll be able to talk about Lysenkoism. And that's going to be a fun discussion.
Oh, you should talk about that one rocket scientist who is also a Crowley occultist.
I mean, yeah, like, I'm gonna have to look that one up, but, like, the Soviet Union was very fond of producing, theories
quacks.
Quacks.
They were quacks, and they would get the ear of Stalin or someone powerful, and because they had the ear of someone powerful, they became law, and they set back scientific progress.
Again.
Now, that's not necessarily any different from how we do it here, see literally any discredited idea. But in the Soviet Union, it was a lot more harmful because they like to think themselves as scientific and would put a lot of weight on these quacks.
Yeah, they put a lot of they put a political weight on these. That, like, at least in a functioning multi-party democracy, when something like that falls out of favor, the infrastructure that supports it will also fall out of favor. Not in the Soviet Union. It would stick around unless the government acted.
So you had Lysenko setting back biology and genetics for generations, just because he got in Stalin's ear and made an argument that was kind of political about evolution.
God, and it's weird, you know, as a historian, because you will find these primitive communism arguments, and they have a lot of appeal in certain strains of like non-communist thought in the West, because they basically argue that before technology, humans were lived in peace with their environment and with each other, and that's really appealing. To
Well, we know that we know that's not true.
Yep, I mean, like, sort of. But it definitely wasn't like
life was not less violent back then.
I mean, look, life. You were certainly no more like. It really.
You
depends.
weren't likely
It's
to die
complicated.
You weren't likely to die in a big war, but it was
okay,
absolutely possible that you would die in a skirmish with a neighboring tribe over something or other.
The grubby wizard grew furious with Aladdin. "Give me the lamp," he bellowed. But the lamp sat heavy at the bottom of Aladdin's pocket, a pocket teeming with other treasures, and he could not reach it. And so the sorcerer waxed
reading
foolish with
1001
fury,
Nights.
and he waxed wroth with wrath exceeding. With a gesture, he heaped the earth over the boy by a granary. Out of sight and out of light, beneath the earth, amid that ancient hoard, Aladdin cast away all hope for life. The ne'er-do-well, the boy who wanted no other occupation than a scapegrace life, wept.
Have you ever seen the outtakes
shed
from
a tear
Robin
for
Williams
his
being the
mother.
genie?
And all
Oh,
the
God.
pain he brought her. He shed a tear for his departed
It's him just
father,
being filthy.
Yeah,
and he
pretty
shed
much.
a
He did a
tear
lot of that.
for himself.
Because a lot of people
Aladdin
don't
rubbed his
know. They
hands
only
together
know
for
him
excess
from,
of sorrow.
you know, his
He
kids'
had
movies.
forgotten he wore the
Robin
signet
Williams
ring
was a
that the
stand-up
grubby wizard had
comedian,
given
and
him
he was
before
just a
sending him
filthy
down into the
motherfucker.
Thonic Hall.
Like, listen to his stand-up. I remember
This
him
ring shall
talking
free thee
about,
from all
this is
hurt
after
and
he'd gotten
fear which
sober.
may threaten
I remember him doing a
the
show and
sorcerer
talking
had
about
said.
how, you know,
And as the boy
one of the times he
prayed
got
and
drunk
chafed
and it was
his
coming out
hands,
both
his
ends, and he's
fingers
just,
chanced to rub
it was
the
just
ring,
horrible.
when
Yeah, and he did spend a
the
lot of the
ring's
height of his
familiar
career just
rose
completely
upright
coked
before
up.
him and cried,
So,
"I attend."
I
The
understand that
slave
it
is
dropped
come.
off as he got older,
Ask
but
whatso
like
thou wantest, for that I
it
am the
was,
thrall of
he
him
was
whose
wild.
hand is the
there's a
ring,
reason he ended up as one of those one of the more
signet
famous
of my
vines.
lord and master. Aladdin saw
More
standing
famous
before
what?
him a married, like
Vines.
unto the Ifrit of King Solomon's jinns. He trembled at the terrible sight, but the slave of the ring said,
Is that slang term for something? Like,
No, like Vine
"Sorry,
as in
my
the
children,
videos.
one moment.
Oh!
It's not actually one of the original stories from the Book of 1001 Nights.
Does he
It
look
was
purple
added
in this
by a
shot?
Frenchman
He's looked
in
purple for a while.
1710, I think.
I don't think they got
the
his skin
children
tone
enjoyed
correct.
Probably not. But
And
some
it
people look
contains
weird under.
fragments of
You can make
secrets,
white people look green
like
under
the
the right
signet
light. I
ring
guess you
bearing
can
the
make
seal of
brown people look
Solomon.
purple under the white light.
A ring
He looks
captured
like
by
that
the
guy who
demon
took too
hurled
much,
into the sea.
Elodial
iodine
Silver,
and
yeah.
Yeah.
And he turned
by a
purple,
fisherman
and then ran
who
for office
served to
as a
the
libertarian.
king.
Because of course he did.
A ring
Libertarians
that
are
gave the
fucking
power to
weird.
enslave jinn, exorcise demons, and
It's-
speak with
what
animals.
what else would he have run as?
But that was one of the many tricks of wily Solomon. You see, he had
I gotta talk
not
about
one,
King Solomon, his
but
reputation in
many magical
Judaism and
rings.
outside of Judaism.
These rings are now scattered and lost and coveted.
I'll be interested to hear that, but that will be next time.
But
Yeah.
When we meet the
digress.
Jinn.
The Atenus camp turned up no information regarding the tremors. The Jinn are sensitive to such things. They may know more. Perhaps if you brought an offering to Amir, it would appease him to lend you.
Yeah, that
his
doesn't
knowledge.
work. Spoiler alert.
Yeah. The writers forgot to connect the dots on that one. Speaking of which, thank you everyone, and see you next time.
See you next time.